The battle of the budget has begun, and tonight we're on the record with state lawmakers who will make the decisions on how your money is spent.
It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
Good evening. The short session has begun, so how will the budget be put together? What gets funded? What will be cut? We're going to talk about this tonight with decision makers. And remember, no matter who wins and loses, someone will be unhappy. Many of those who are unhappy will make their voices heard with protests and demonstrations. In fact, last year, about 1,000 people were arrested for doing so as part of the Moral Monday protest. Those protests begin next Monday, and when they do, some new rules will be in place regarding where protests can happen legally. Here's more on this from Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie.
Some of the changes were made because of court rulings in last year's Moral Monday cases. Judges said some building rules were vague and even violated the First Amendment. Representative Tim Moore chairs the commission.
Where the court has said certain provisions of our rules were in fact unconstitutional. So it would be irresponsible for us to ignore that and simply continue with those rules.
Moore says the rules are based on current practice, but some changes go farther. For example, groups are now banned from crowding into public spaces or hearings.
We can't allow a situation, for example, where folks would crowd the doors and keep members from being able to get on the House floor or the Senate floor.
The new rules also say legislative police can order you to leave the building if they believe you pose an imminent threat of disturbance, even if you haven't actually done anything. If you don't leave, you can be charged with a misdemeanor. Law professor and Moral Monday protester Irving Joyner says they don't define what imminent means.
They leave officers with unbridled discretion to interpret them in any way that they wish to interpret them.
This is limiting people's ability to have their voices heard.
House Democratic leader Larry Hall says it's a blatant attempt to keep Moral Monday protesters out of the building. He says the rules violate people's constitutional rights to assemble and to petition their lawmakers.
They elect us. We work for them. It's not the other way around. This is not our house. This is the people's house. That's why they call it the people's house.
With us tonight, two members of the North Carolina House of Representatives, both from Wake County, Republican Nelson Dollar and Democrat Duane Hall. Also with us is Capitol Bureau Chief Laura Leslie. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in. We're going to talk about the budget in just a second. Part of what you're doing, though, is deliberating in public. Laura and I were just talking. North Carolina has had a really open House of Representatives, an open Senate as far as the public coming in and really being able to be heard in the past. Why the change now?
What we're doing is clarifying the rules and also responding to what the courts have been telling us. Those rules have not been updated since 1987, so a number of the provisions are essentially modernization. North Carolina General Assembly is the most public legislative building in the country. It will remain the most open and public legislative building in the entire country.
It would be even more public if we could televise what was going in there day in, day out. I guess that's something we can bring up later.
I would love to do that. Of course, as y'all know, that you record and televise a lot of sessions in the House.
But we'd love to have our own C-SPAN version of House of Representatives. Just thought I'd put that out there maybe for another time.
It will be noted for the future.
Okay.
But to get back to the rules, I mean, one of the changes that critics are talking about is this introduction of the idea of imminent disturbance, right? An imminent threat of disturbance. That people who are in the building can be asked to leave by legislative staff or legislative police if they believe that those people are posing an imminent threat of causing a disturbance. How do we know? I mean, the imminent is not defined in those rules. I mean, is it a question of when they're there, how many are there, what they look like, what they are carrying? I mean, how can we trust that that's going to be enforced fairly? And Duane, I'll let you answer.
Well, as an attorney, I understand the problem the courts are having with the issue of vagueness. They have to have a measuring stick so they can understand when there is a threat.
Right.
Imminent, again, is something that can be open to subjectivity. My hope is that when we do define it, we haven't really discussed the exact parameters, but that it remains open to the people, particularly for political speech. We've had lots on the grounds outside as well as the buildings. As long as there's not a physical threat, I hope it remains open for political speech.
And just one more question on that. When people have shown up in the past and you're in the middle of debate, you're in the middle of doing your business, is it a major distraction? Are you able to move forward? Are you paying attention to what's being said? Is it frustrating?
Well, I've always been able to get into the chamber and to conduct business. There have been scenarios, and one was related in the hearing yesterday, of a group of senior citizens that was in a meeting room meeting with legislators, and a group of demonstrators came in and really frightened those senior citizens. So we want to make sure that the building is open and accessible to everyone, so everyone has an equal opportunity to express their views to their elected officials and do it in an appropriate manner.
Okay, let's talk about the... did you have something else you wanted to add?
Well, I just want to say that the feeling's been almost the opposite for me sitting in the chambers. When I hear people outside protesting and chanting, it's been almost inspirational to me. I look up at the board every time and see a 77-43 vote, so it's been encouraging to some people on the other side of the aisle to know we have support there. Speaking of 77-43 votes, when this budget is being cobbled by state lawmakers, both in the Senate and House, protected with this gentleman sitting right here, do you feel, as being in the minority, and the minority being as small as it is, that your voice is ever heard? It's definitely heard. I mean, both sides are being heard. We obviously don't have the votes. What's going to happen with the budget? Governor's budget's always a starting point. Where it goes from there, documents always look different once both sides have the chance to dig into them, reflect for adjustments, changes, priorities. I think the final version we're going to see is going to look very different. How much do you listen to him?
Well,
and his colleagues?
And his colleagues?
Sure.
Well, we're willing to listen. I've met with various groups of Democrat legislators over the years, and my door's always been open to hear requests. You get some small requests, you get some larger requests. What I've asked of his colleagues is that you can have a larger voice if you're going to be voting with us on the budget. If you're willing to join in with us on the budget, you can certainly have a much larger say. But if you're going to come in and criticize it, then don't expect to see as many of your priorities in there.
I have to ask, you know, one of the things that the governor is doing in his budget that we covered on Wednesday is that he would be making some more cuts to different state agencies and departments in order to pay for a raise, sort of across-the-board raise for state teachers and employees. Not a big raise, but something anyway. Can the agencies and departments really take another 2% cut? I mean, they've been cut for the last few years because of the recession and spending limitations. I mean, are we down to the bone in some cases?
It's not 2% across the board in terms of cuts. These cuts are very strategic in nature. In some cases, for example, with Health and Human Services, quite a bit of the reduction is actually better utilization, probably $100 million worth of utilization of federal money that's accessible to us, and that's allowing us to replace state money and to use those state funds for other priorities in the budget. In the area of education, for example, average daily membership, the anticipated student population coming to us from DPI, from the professionals, they're saying we're going to have a lower student population in the upcoming year, so those things are factored in the budget as well. So there are a number of areas, particularly JPS, that are not being cut anywhere close to 2%, simply because we know we've got areas of concern there, and we want to make sure that we're budgeting adequately in all the areas of state government. On that note, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about the North Carolina state budget. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're on the record tonight talking about the North Carolina state budget. Two members from the House of Representatives, both from Wake County, are with us tonight, Republican Nelson Dollar and Democrat Duane Hall. Laura?
Now, just before the break, we were asking Representative Dollar, who's the senior budgetary of the House, about whether or not there's going to be adequate funding in state agencies and departments. He says he believes there is. You, I believe, have a different take on that.
Well, a budget reflects priorities, and one of the areas where we vastly disagree are the enormous cuts to education. The cuts to the university system amount to about 4%, which is in effect robbing Peter to pay Paul for our small salary increases for teachers. All of government agencies across the state, I feel like there's a bit of smoke and mirror going on here, because this budget that the governor put out did something that's been done for the first time in North Carolina history, and that is the salaries of teachers and state employees and their benefits are used on a separate line. This time they're put in the overall budget for the agencies, which again makes it look as though there's not as large a cut to that agency. So there's quite a few cuts that we disagree with.
What about this accusation of smoke and mirrors? Why redefine of how this budget is put together?
Well, all of the other salary and benefits are in those line items. So why have your salary increase in a separate line item? You put it in there where those full expenses are, and then you understand exactly what that budget's going to be. It's going to be in there the following year, so why not go ahead and put it in there in the year in which you were actually budgeting. I would say this budget, my 10 years in the General Assembly, this is the soundest budget that I have ever seen a governor produce. It's solid financially. There are no budget tricks in what Governor McCrory has presented. I think they've done an outstanding job, and it provides a great foundation for the General Assembly to do its work.
Did you see any tricks in there?
Well, maybe I shouldn't have worded it trick. It works the way Nelson said it, but the point is it's never been done that way before. And the effect is it makes it look as though the agencies are getting the same amount of funding, the overall funding to the agency, when it's a part of that versus completely separate the way it's always been done in North Carolina history.
I think what is an advantage is we're not paying for recurring expenditures with non-recurring money. That's what we've seen a whole succession of governors do, Purdue, Easley, and on back. So this governor has, some of the items are new, but procedures, but they're all very sound.
Let me ask the $64,000 question now. Are those raises going to stick? Because what we've heard from House and Senate leaders is that they've committed to the starting teacher salary raises. They've committed to raises for state employees and teachers, but nobody is saying, okay, we're going to sign on to these kind of numbers.
Oh, they will stick. The money is there. One of the things that Republicans have been good about over the last several years is even in incredibly difficult times, we have not spent all the money. We have saved back money. We knew that with tax reform, which is helping energize the economy in North Carolina, we're seeing unemployment go down, we're seeing jobs being created in this state. We knew that when you make those kinds of changes, you have to have some cushion in there. We provided that cushion, and we're in a tight but a very sound position.
A few issues there. Unemployment, the numbers have gone down some, but we changed the rules of who qualifies. So if you don't apply, if you're not part of it, you're not counted in that. So that's one factor in unemployment. As far as the money for teacher salary increases, the governor's plan is 2%, and trust me, I mean, the teachers trusted him when he cut 4,000 assistants, when he got rid of fellows' career status, when they brought in vouchers. But this plan, it promises to raise it in the future, and we don't have all the reoccurring money for that. Part of that is one-time money. And if you look at the numbers and dig into it, he promises to raise it to the average around in the next couple of years, but those states will then be higher. And it's also a partial merit pay system, which if you use the measuring stick from the past, 66% or two-thirds of teachers were rated as highly effective in the past. Unless they change the measuring sticks on teachers, we won't have the money to give that many teachers a raise.
I think what you need to look at is the talking points are fine on the Democratic side, but look at the reality. The Democrats furloughed teachers. The Democrats froze teacher salaries. Republicans have unfrozen those salaries. We're working on issues like starting pay for teachers, which we know is having an impact on our schools of education. We need more individuals interested in being teachers in our state. We're addressing those issues, addressing the pay issues. You know, teacher pay didn't just drop into the 40s recently. That came under prior administration.
Well, you talk about unfreezing, but that thawing process is taking a long time. You say these raises will stick. When will teachers see a raise in their paychecks?
They should see it beginning with the new budget year. Once we are able to pass the budget, new budget year begins July 1st. I
just have to ask, I mean, hear what you're saying about the importance of teachers, but that's not the message that we were getting out of the legislature for the last couple of years. You know, at least, you know, as far as NCAE, which I realize has its own political side and that sometimes causes conflict with the leadership. But, I mean, what has changed to make this happen this year?
Well, what has changed is we have been budgeting responsibly. And maybe that's new in the General Assembly, but Republicans have been responsible in their budgeting. We focused on getting our economy going. Jobs are the key to long-term availability of money in the general fund and in the state as a whole. So we focused on the appropriate priorities, and we're moving forward with addressing teacher and state employee raises this year.
Representative Hall, last word to you.
I agree with him that we have a crisis in North Carolina with our teachers recruiting, retaining. They're leaving by the thousands. What we would like to do is a 5% pay raise for teachers. I think we could get that by rolling back the tax break we gave last year to only people that make more than $1 million a year. That would be enough for the 5% raise for teachers.
And the odds of that happening?
I think we can get closer than this budget. Where we'll actually get is yet to be seen.
Representative Duane Hall, the first time we've had you here. Hope you'll come back and join us again. Representative Donald, you've been here many times. We hope to have you back too. And the best to you in this session. And let's all of us hope that it will live up to its name as a short session. When we come back, we'll be joined by Mark Binkley.